We are. Well, hello once again. Thank you all for being here on this rainy Thursday. It is wonderful to see so many faces, and we will try to be good about honoring your time and let you know what you need to know, but then also let everybody get back to the things that they were doing in their everyday. So what we wanted to do as we're having a conversation about sort of a little bit of an end of year wrap up town hall. We wanted to sort of just reflect a little bit about this year. It's been an opportunity for us to learn a lot about where we stand. We've tried some new things. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've hosted some town halls and meetings and surveys, and lots of us were new. And so we went on listening tours and sort of trying to really take stock in where we stand so that we can chart our path forward. And so we wanted to sort of have this opportunity to share a little bit about that, get a little bit more feedback, and then share a little bit about where we're going next. So if you remember, we most recently, we asked through the expanded cabinet group, we asked our committees and our departments and our division leaders to engage in a conversation with their teams about what we want the future to hold. And we've received back notes from 19 different conversations. And so those conversations hopefully were had with many of you. And what we've done is tried to create a document that will sort of just give us a general summary of what those conversations looked like. We intentionally did not launch a survey. We did not want to just sort of let folks sit behind their computer and fill out a survey. We wanted it to be a conversation that was had by hopefully managers and supervisors with the folks who are, executing a lot of the work. And so that was a huge part of the key and the purpose of this work, was to engage in the conversations, to listen to one another, to learn from one another, to gather momentum and things like that. And so this on your screen, this was the first question we asked. And if you remember back to the one of the last town halls we had, which was about the name change and branding and rebranding, we talked about how this all kind of fits together, right? That we talked about the brand being the totality of thoughts, feelings, memories, and relationships through every single touch point, right? And so if we want to think about what folks are going to say about Virginia Peninsula, we need to make sure that we are incorporating that through everything that we do. It's not just what the IA team is pushing out, but it is also everything that we do. And that is sort of where we're coming from with this question about what do we want people to say about Virginia Peninsula Community College. The other thing that we talked about in that rebranding conversation was people talk about Thomas Nelson, their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, and we asked folks to take a moment and reflect on what people are saying about Thomas Nelson, and then what it is that we want them to say about Virginia Peninsula. And so based on all those conversations that were had, these are the words that came up, and I'll sort of share with you how we put it together. So hopefully you can all see that. So the word cloud is that the bigger the word or the larger the word, the more frequent that thing was mentioned in our conversations. So you can see how some of those words, education, students, right, they're like any college, and then you look a little bit further and maybe community or affordable are any community college. And so we need to think about what makes us unique, what helps us identify as unique brand, and that kind of thing. And so in looking at this, I want to ask this group, we got 112 of us here, what are the words that stand out to you most that could potentially be our unique niche, right? What could Virginia Peninsula be honing in on that really resonates with you that we want folks to say about us? So the chat is open. You could raise your hand. You can unmic. Yes, Stephanie?
Yes, what are the little tiny words? That's what I'm curious about.
Right. So those are the ones that were a little less frequent, and there's a lot of
I
them.
understand that, but I was wondering what they were because I can't read them from here.
Right. So there's a lot. There's believe, growth, challenges, prioritize, goals. There's so many. Focused, attainment. What we tried to do is take a lot of the words and then also find some synonyms that to line them up, so that if a word was very, very similar, we sort of picked one or the other. But for the most part, there's a lot. Innovation is in here. Welcoming, success, tradition. But those are some of them. So if you can, I wish I could make it bigger. And I'm happy to share this afterwards.
I was just curious. That's all. Thank you.
I hear you.
Hey, Ada, shouldn't military be in there somewhere?
Oh, well, military wasn't mentioned in any of those.
Wow.
Yeah, I found that surprising too.
Yeah, I mean, considering the peninsula and yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, and I should say, this is not like a scientific method, right? We asked folks to have conversations and take notes and send them in, and then we compiled those notes. So, and we just are looking at what are the things that rise to the surface. Another reason why I think that this was the way that we chose to do this activity or exercise is because it is what comes to mind first when you ask the question, what do you want people to say about Virginia Peninsula? These are the things that came up first, and these are the things that came up most. It was a, internal poll, but just sort of generating that conversation. I'm seeing all sorts of things. I think this is, they're all going to direct message. So let me share that. Military friendly, caring stands out, caring and compassionate, community, student-centered, affordable, prepare, caring, absolutely. So I think a lot of these things are definitely words that a lot of us share and have been coming up. Miss Frank, Jean, you have to unmute.
Thank you. Forgot to unmute. Yes, I'm glad to see that education is big and first choice, because we are an institution of higher education. So I'm glad that education sticks out. But I'm also glad to see that many people want to think of it as their first choice as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. So a lot of these, I agree. And what we want folks to say about us is up here. And I think a lot of it's in there. One of the words that we really focused on when we had the conversation in that expanded cabinet group was the word anyone, and sort of the idea that this place should be and is for anyone, right? It's for the student who's coming right out of high school. It's for the person who's going back after several years off. It's for, we talked to an amazing student the other day, and he was formerly incarcerated, and he's trying to build it back up again and get his life back. And so it's this place is for anyone. And that sort of really resonated. That was one of the words that in our expanded cabinet group, we really talked about that. So what we're hoping to do is use this to generate some ideas that will resonate, that we can thread throughout. And we've been having these conversations just in the past couple of weeks with our group, and then also with this expanded cabinet group. I do want to share too, one of the questions that came up is like, how different is this list from what we've been saying we want people to say about Thomas Nelson? And so I took an opportunity to pull together this list. This word cloud is the mission, vision, values, and strategic planning goals that we have that we created. And that is what this word cloud is. And it is tremendously similar, right? There are a lot of overlap in those words, which tells us that what we have wanted folks to say about Thomas Nelson is going to be similar or the same to what we want them to say about Virginia Peninsula. but wanting it to happen and getting folks to say it might be two different things. And so that is one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit today. Yeah, a lot of overlap. I want to check the chat. We wanted to make sure that the chat was open so that you could chat with everyone. And I'm wondering if it's not. So let me just check the chat settings. Because a lot of direct messages are coming in, but I want to make sure you can chat. Yeah. It looks like you can, but if you can't, I apologize for that. I must have done something wrong in my settings. All right. So good news that we have found some threads and some consistencies. Doris and the institutional advancement team are working furiously to start thinking about the brand, the rebranding, the marketing, and how it all fits together from that marketing perspective, which will be some of that public messaging. The key is that it's not just up to them, because it is the totality of thoughts, feelings, memories, and relationships delivered through every touch point. So we could have this amazing marketing and have everyone say, wow, Virginia Peninsula has some great marketing. But if their experience is not living up to that marketing, then they're still going to say whatever it is that they say, right? And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping our conversations and the next part of the discussions that were had are going to come through. So how is the way that the individual departs from us and goes out and talks about us to others? So the other questions that we asked in this discussion was not only what do we want people to say about Virginia Peninsula, but we also asked what is working. And the idea there was to try to identify some of the things that we're starting to do that are working really well. What is happening at the college that will help us reach our goal of what we want people to say about us. I will tell you, many of the teams that came together and started having these conversations were incredibly introspective, and they were starting to talk about their systems and processes that they've identified and improvements that they're making, and things that are working really, really well. Again, this is not a scientific method, right? It's like a perspective, it's a snapshot in time. Whatever went well that morning before they had the conversation is maybe what came up in their discussion with their teams. And it's also the kind of thing where as one person might say, oh, this is working really well, then because it is a conversation, someone else say, oh yeah, and let's add to it. So it is not scientific, but it is the things that came up the most during this conversation. So let me share that. And again, I tried to make it as big as possible, but I know it is hard on some of your screens. So I will sort of go down. In terms of what is working, a lot of folks were really thinking about our student support services and our systems for accessibility and accommodations, outreach. We're working on privacy and making sure that we're being thoughtful about that. We're addressing mental health. Single Stop is a great program. So we're really identifying the programs that we have that are working. A lot of folks were just really, I guess, in a very good way, sort of very proud of the faculty and staff and the culture that we have and the amazing folks that we have here. In terms of teamwork, there was a lot of that came back that was about, we're doing less, or we're doing more with less. And so we're cross-training, right? And we're doing a lot of development that way, that skills that I might not have had before, I am learning from my colleagues. And everyone is sort of in this willing and capable space to do that, which was really nice to see. And then there was some references to open and transparent communication, that we are doing a better job, that this is starting to work. And they very specifically referenced a couple things here. So, and then the other things, it's not that the things that are lower on the list aren't working, it's that they were mentioned less because maybe they're less frequently talked about that day. But again, it just gives us some level of insight. So I'm interested to hear sort of how you react to this list of what is working.
I think what we're seeing here is that much of what we're seeing in these responses corresponds to the word cloud that we were just looking at.
Other thoughts on, I think that that's a really good point, that the things that are working are going to lead folks to talk about Virginia Peninsula in that way.
I think it's interesting that branding, marketing, and outreach are like at the bottom.
Right. And I guess it's interesting, right? Because this is the answer to what's working. And it's not necessarily that it's not working. We're coming to that, but it is that maybe it's just not the first thing on people's minds when they think about what is working. And as I said, I think a lot of groups were really introspective and thinking about what's working in my area, since marketing and outreach tends to be in one particular area. It may simply be that it didn't come up in a lot of those sort of other groups' conversations. So these are just the things that are on the front of people's minds. So that being said, let me flip to the next question. We also asked, what's not working? What needs to be done better, faster, more efficiently? What do we need to stop doing? Again, with this in mind of what do we want people to say and what do we need to change about how we're doing things? Again, we found that some teams were very introspective and they were thinking about, we've made improvements in these areas, but we've also identified other systems and processes that could be improved. In some cases, it was a lot easier, it seemed, to talk about what's not working in other departments. And so I think that that's human nature, right? It's really easy to say like, well, we're doing this really well, but these other things all in these other areas maybe are not going so well. So that was really interesting perspective to read through these notes. But perception is reality, right? So if it looks like something's not working in one area, and we say, yeah, that doesn't look like it's working very well, then that is going to be the reality we need to deal with. Again, not a scientific method, a lot of feedback that came in, and we tried to gather all of this. And it may just be a snapshot, right? Like what went wrong that morning that I was frustrated with, that's what I'm going to bring up. That's what I'm going to air. But here is our list of what is not working. I think in a surprise to no one, the top few have come up a lot recently, and it really highlights that these are the things that are on our minds the most that need to be addressed the quickest. So the first one is effective communication. If you can't read it, lots and lots of discussion about effective communication. So whether that was like top down, whether it was students complain that they don't get responses, whether it's, we're not being efficient or effective in our replies or whatever the case is, there was a lot of reference to tightening up communication methods. The other second most frequently mentioned item was processes and systems not functioning well. And a few things were listed specifically. So committees were referenced and scheduling and the application process and student onboard. I mean, these are things, again, they may not have been mentioned many, many times, but they were all mentioned as just systems things that we need to take a look at and make sure that we are tightening them up. And the third, sort of not a surprise, was that employee morale is down, and it is difficult to be excited about the work we do when we're not feeling communicated to, and we're also feeling our systems and processes are broken. So not necessarily something that is a surprise, but is something that we definitely want to make sure that we're addressing. So again, sort of let me sort of ask for feedback and thoughts as you look down this list.
Ada, Andriana's got her hand up.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I was looking at the chat and trying to fix it so you could chat to all, but the
you're
suggestion
fine.
wasn't working. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Am I misremembering? Are we simultaneously agreeing that student services are both working and not working? Was that on the other side?
Yes, that is exactly what folks are saying. And it's really interesting to look at that, right? So if we want folks to have that's part of the thing, right? That's part of what we're looking at is how could we be getting this like incredibly mixed messaging, or how is that messaging what's out there? I mean, that's a very good question.
Answer that, I think, on faculty's perspective, because student services is complex. So you lump lots of things into it, and maybe one area within that unit isn't working, but other things are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I imagine that's probably the case. It requires us to take a much deeper dive. It's the same kind of thing where someone might say communication is working and someone else says communication isn't working. And so diving much deeper into in what cases is it working and in what cases is it not? And in, what are the changes there? So I actually have a poll for that. So this is one that like keeps coming up. And so we're going to try this where I'm going to launch this poll, and I'm hoping it's going to work. This is my first poll, but it's about the methods of communication that we are using. So what 3 standard methods do you use the most to get your information or to share your information? Is the first question. And the second part of it is what public facing methods do you use the most? More like social media and things like that. All right, I think there might be a few who are still weighing in, but I just want to mention Erica fixed the chat. Thank you very much, Erica Charity, for being our hero. So JJ, you make a really good point. It says in the chat, it sounds like we have a lot of things that we're trying to do, but the coordination is not really happening. I think you're spot on. All right. So we're primarily using campus-wide emails, town halls, department meetings, and the website to get our information or communicate information. The Navigator and Facebook are sort of our preferred methods, generally speaking. So that is really good. And some of us do not have a social media presence. Absolutely. We can't use just one of these. We have to use a lot, but if we're not coordinating them, then we're not sending out the right messages or the same messages or timely messages. None of the above was not an option. That is accurate. Hopefully you are engaging to try to get your message from somewhere. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, but this is really, really helpful to look at that. All right. Thank you for your participation. I think one of the things that we're trying to figure out is if we think, if in some ways we're communicating really well, right? Some of those things are working. Some of them are not, but the communication coordination overall is not. And that's something that we really need to start thinking about. So I appreciate that quick feedback. Still a work in progress, still something that we are going to continue to work on. All right. So I want to share a few of the other things. This was intended to be not only what we've learned, but also what we've been doing. And I want to highlight a few things that are underway that are related to what we've been learning and how we've been trying to respond to that. So in order to respond to the what's not working that we've been identifying, a lot of it is related to those processes and systems. So from the enrollment perspective, right, our enrollment teams are working on, in case anyone was not aware in this, right, we did some program audits and program and services audits in the enrollment area. And so we had some external folks from the VCCS and from colleges where we know that they are doing similar systems as us. And they came in and they went through a process, which I'm sure was very difficult, but we really appreciate folks taking the time and effort to go through that. And they audited areas to get feedback about what could be improved. They are working really hard to reestablish some relationships that have fallen by the wayside, mostly because of COVID, right? Like when we're not out and about and interacting, then those relationships don't get nurtured. And so they're working on that. They are on a 3 or 4 week mission of getting into just about every high school in the region to try to reestablish and return to the high schools, at least as one market area. And we have a couple foundation funded initiatives that I believe that we've shared, but I'll just share them again pretty quickly. And that is that the foundation has funded us with the ability to expand our athletic programs, to expand some recruitment efforts into the southeast of Newport News, and also to work on some minority male success initiatives. So we've started to, and as part of all three of those things is a recruitment component to try to increase not only our reach, but also who we're attracting to the institution. So a lot of things underway in that area. We talked a lot about rebranding and a promotions plan. So of course, we're going to capitalize on the name change and try to use that as a big promotion area. We're refreshing the website and all of our marketing pieces with our marketing plan. That group is doing a lot of getting feedback. Hopefully you all participated in the survey, which was a follow-up to the conversations, and gave a lot of input about where you think we should be going in terms of our visuals and what happens that way. And then the other thing is linking marketing to enrollment. That is not something that we have done in the past, to be able to identify which marketing areas are directly linked to bringing more students in. And so they're working on a plan for that that will be rolled out soon. For those of you who are on the faculty-led bolstering enrollment, I don't want to call it a town hall, but workshop, which was really excellent. They listed out their 5 sort of priorities in terms of mentoring and partnerships, marketing, collaboration, and strategic scheduling. So as they start working on some of those things, it's going to address some of the processes and systems that need to be repaired, but then also some of these other pieces that we talked about not working. And then workforce development has been working on accessible schedules. So they've changed a lot on their web presence. There are some amazing work that they're doing at 25 and J, which is in Southeast Newport News. And they have been having information sessions every other week on Mondays. And I was just there this past Monday, and there was easily 25 interested students who came to sign up and register and get more information about workforce development. And of course, they're about to finalize the lease on the Williamsburg Trade Center. So lots of amazing things are happening. And as those things are happening, trying to make sure that we're addressing systems and processes, communication, and hopefully improving those things will also impact our morale. So I share all of this because I wanted to sort of boast a little bit about the things that are in place. But I also know that we have these conversations where we say, okay, that's all great, but I'm not part of any of those initiatives. And so what I want to hopefully impart is that not all of these things were led in, many of these things were not led in a top-down manner. A lot of these initiatives stemmed from individuals saying, we can do something, we can be a part of this, we can think about the things that need to be addressed. And they took steps for continuous improvement in order to figure out what's not working, why it's not working, and how to make those things work better. So in terms of, I'm sharing a couple of the tenets of continuous improvement. If we all took a look at what we were doing and started thinking about how are the ways that I can improve things, and I know a lot of you are already doing this because it came through so apparently in those conversations. I know that there's a lot of systems in our financial aid or in our business practices that have been really looked at and scrutinized. And we're trying to make sure that not only are we in compliance, but how do we make things simple and efficient and easy for our students, right? We're looking at all of those things in terms of customer service or student service or student facing activities, right? And trying to make sure that we are looking at what's working, what's not working, and how can we improve those things? How can we humanize the work and empower folks to make decisions and empower folks to make changes that really make sense? So what I am saying to you is that if you find yourself sitting here and listening to this conversation and you're thinking, yeah, we've got some processes that need to be addressed, don't wait. Don't wait for someone to say, yeah, let's choose that one to fix. If you are aware of something and you think that you've got some thoughts about how that could be fixed, take a chance and try to make that better. I want to give you a couple things that I have done in the past that I know that some of you are doing, and I'm going to share it broadly in case you've not heard of these things. So the great thing about higher ed, right, is that we do a lot of the same stuff every year. Or every semester in some cases, right? We have these processes that we just keep repeating. And so you have countless opportunities to pause and take stock in what you're doing, to think about what you've been doing and how to improve it. So leaders, managers, process executors, don't wait. You can do a SWOT analysis anytime. I know we've got some business faculty on here. Feel free to chime in about the benefits of that. After action reviews, if you haven't done that, we are going to do one, for example, after we get through our commencement and our graduation ceremony. So sometime, not Tuesday, Dr. Hollins, but afterwards, we will sit down and we will talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how we could do it better next time. Was the venue good? Was it bad? Could it have been better? All of those things. And we will do it close to when we finish that process so that we know that we can make improvements in the future. It's not going to be perfect. We're going to make one change at a time. And the other opportunity would be like a hits and misses. Just a very simple, what went well and what didn't go well. Sorry, I'm trying to follow the chats too because so much are coming in. So if you haven't used some of these techniques, I definitely encourage you to think about doing that. If you don't know where to start, this is a great place, just starting to unearth in your own areas and having these kinds of questions and having these kinds of conversations. The other thing I want to have us start thinking about, if I can be so bold, is remembering that every interaction promotes the brand. And so how do we ensure that every interaction leaves folks with something that they can talk positively about? Now, here's the thing, right? People think, well, I'm going to say no to a student and therefore they're not going to talk positively about us, right? And that's not exactly the case. We know that it's all about phrasing and it's always how we talk about things, right? So one thing that I find kind of difficult to do, but when I'm really thoughtful about it, I can, and I will impart to you, is this idea of when someone has a concern or a problem, And our first response may be, well, I can't help you with that, or I can't do that, or our policy says such and such, and so therefore I can't. But if we figure out how to say it in a, well, I can see your problem, here's what I can do for you. You're not changing something, you're not changing the policy, you're just rephrasing it and what you can do for them instead of what you can't. And it changes everything about how they walk away from that interaction. So think about those conversations you've had with folks. You know, whether it's having a conversation in financial aid or student services or whatever the case may be. You know, you're not going to fill out the application for them, but what you can do is lead them to the right web page and walk them through it, right? So don't start with I can't, but start with I can. So just some simple mind shift changes. We've talked about this a little bit in the past about what it is, what is the story that you're telling folks about this college? When you talk about, when you meet up with your buddies and they say, how's work? What is the story that you're telling? And then how does that story get translated over and over and over again to everyone beyond that? And so thinking about that and thinking about how you're making that message is really, really important. I also encourage you, if you are frontlines folks, come up with a plan so that you will have response times that are consistent with all of your colleagues. How quickly are you going to respond to emails? How quickly are you going to get back to folks? What does that communication look like? And how can you make sure you're presenting in a way that is consistent with everybody in your unit? So just a few things to consider as you wrap up this semester and hopefully do some hits and misses and what went well and what didn't, and how can we improve in the future. The last thing I wanted to say today, because I'm going to hand this over to Stephen Felker in a moment, is that change is really, really hard, right? If any of you have been to the doctor lately and the doctor says to you, like, you need to do some things differently in your life, so many people get that message and they're like, yeah, okay, like that's just really hard, right? Like you're not going to then come home and run a 5K if you've never run a step in your life, right? But just, you know, that change is really hard. The best example I can give is like Dick Cheney had 5 heart attacks before he started exercising, right? Like 5, and bypass surgery and all sorts of stuff. Like, he was like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And so we know that change is really, really hard, and changing an organization is probably even harder because it takes each one of us the motivation to make those changes. What I like about this image, right, is that we're all trying really hard and we want it to be simple, but it is going to be super messy. And the couple steps that we've taken in that direction can be derailed pretty easily and quickly. But I hope that you all will see the progress that is being made and the hearts and minds that are working to make improvements. And that if we all continue to work towards that, we'll be able to get where we need to go. So that being said, change requires patience because not everyone can adapt at the same pace. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and let Stephen Felker jump in because I feel like I've been talking way too much. And he is going to share a little bit about the enrollment thermometer in the interest of making sure that we are being transparent, that we are sharing everything that we have and that we're sharing everything we know. But also with all of those other things in mind, the hopeful takeaway will be that this thermometer is how we gauge how we're doing, right? When you go to the doctor again, and they say, let me give you some numbers and some stats, right? We may not like what it says, but it tells us how we're doing. And so the reason why we wanted to share this at this point is because it's a little bit of a new look, but it will really, I think, give us a good idea about how we're doing, and maybe help motivate us to like get off the couch and start walking with each other around the block more frequently, so that we can we can get the health of our institution back to where it absolutely can be.
Well, thank you, Ada, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, it's, as Ada mentioned, you know, all of these efforts that we're taking on and these things that we're kind of questioning for ourselves and thinking about how we can do better. You know, there's a lot of great things that can come out of that, and enrollment is just one of them, right? But we definitely want to make that connection and just think through with you a little bit about where we are in terms of enrollment and really what we're doing in terms of goal setting for enrollment for this coming year. So right now we're just completing the 2021-2022 academic year. We know, you know, where we're coming out in enrollment for that year. We're going to be down about 8.5% from the prior year, and you know, a year that was down very substantially due to the pandemic. And so, of course, we're trying to do things to move back into a growth pattern of enrollment. And so, the thermometer, as Ada mentioned, is one way of looking at our enrollment information, and is really a way of looking at it in terms of how close are we coming to a target, right? How close are we coming to a goal that we set for ourselves? So there's a lot of information on the thermometer. I think most of you have probably seen a version of the thermometer in the past and know that it helps us look at the extent to which we're converting our applicants for a given semester over to registered and ultimately enrolled, hopefully successful students. It gives us a look at kind of how we've changed over time in enrollment, both overall and for our different academic divisions and some of our specialized programs. But really kind of the main piece of the thermometer is that thermometer graphic itself, right? Which has kind of helped us see where we are relative to our overall goal. In the past, you may recall we had essentially two thermometer graphics on the report. We were looking both at student headcount and at full-time equivalent students. One way we're moving forward is to really look at it more directly in terms of full-time student equivalency, because that one is where our funding comes from, right? It's based not on how many students we serve, but essentially how many credit hours they're taking with us. And the other reason for emphasizing FTEs more is because it looks more holistically at enrollment, right? Enrollment's not just about recruitment. It's not just about the number of students we serve. It's also about retention. It's about how we work with and retain the students that we have, right? And so we're really hoping to take more of that focus, and thus are kind of condensing the thermometer so that's really the emphasis area of it. The other important change for us, I think, and a little bit more significant change, is to make this really about where we need to be in terms of budget, right? And so in the past, we've had some different ways of setting, you know, what the 100% of the thermometer, what that ultimate goal number is. And where we've landed on now is to, at least for this coming year, make that 100% target the place we need to be in good financial health to meet our budget for FY24, which is, you know, we'll just start a little over a year from now, but is when we're not going to have that one-time money from the CARES Act, from carryover funds, those other things available to us that are really allowing us right now to be in good shape for another year, right? And so if you look on the thermometer as it's presented now, there's always going to be kind of 3 data points, right? We'll always know where are we right now. So you know, looking at the one here now, we're looking at summer 2022 as of this past Monday. You know, we're just over 60% of where we would need to be for that growth number of about 14% to put us in place for, you know, where we need to be by FY24. And then also on the thermometer, you see those 2 goal points, right? So the 100% is that FY 2024 budget level that we need to be at. And then down somewhat below that is where we need to be for FY23, right? And so, and that the reason that FY23 one is lower is because we have those carryover funds. We have, you know, those one-time monies that help get us through the 1 year. So really the kind of way to interpret and think about the thermometer going forward is for us to be on the path to financial health. We need to be, really between those two numbers in each of the terms as we proceed through this year. So, ideally we'd be up at 100% or above, but really we need to at least be making progress and growth over that FY23 marker and closer toward that FY 2024 marker. That's going to take a lot of work for us, right? We've got a lot of ideas here and thinking about, ways to improve enrollment. We've got, as Ada mentioned, faculty committees working on this. We've got a lot of people and groups thinking about how we grow enrollment. But we've got a big hill to climb in terms of where we need to be by FY24, right? That's we've been declining for a long time, and we need to see some substantial growth to get to where we're looking to be in good financial health. So that's really what we wanted to share, is that this is a report that you're going to start seeing very regularly. We're going to move to this being sent out to the entire college community every Monday, so you all will receive this and be able to see and keep track of where we are on enrollment and where we are relative to those two important points, right? Markers on the enrollment thermometer, and you'll be able to hopefully have some conversation around this, and hopefully, start seeing some positive outcomes come from all of this work that Ada was mentioning and we've all talked through as a group. So wanted to share that, make sure you're aware of this report and that it'll be much more readily available to you all soon and coming to you regularly, and that kind of what you're looking at and how to interpret this. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you all may have. Jean, you have your hand up, go ahead.
Stephen, thank you for giving us this information. It's pretty sobering. But there is one thing on the G3 on the bottom where it says program area G3, that 306, that's for 2022. Is that a combination of students that are already enrolled in ABH, the pizzazz and the STEM, or is that G3 on its own and is not included in the division numbers?
Gotcha. Yeah, it's the first, Gene. So it's it's a combination of students, within each of the academic divisions that are in G3 programs. So it is a separate count from the division counts. Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason the growth is so great on that one is because, well, Gene knows this better than anyone, but we had a number of G3 programs that were kind of initially eligible, but we hadn't gone through the whole process as of last year. So now we have far more programs approved for G3 funding, and those are the ones reflected on the thermometer.
Stephen, I don't know if you saw one of the questions that came in the chat was about a day-to-day trend line comparison. And if you could comment about whether that would be, day-to-day would be beneficial or not, or if there is one and how that might work.
Sure. So so the thermometer is kind of one enrollment report we have, right? There are other enrollment reports and available out there. We have ones that look at that trend over time, right, and compare it to the previous year and kind of give you a sense of where we stand relative to last year in terms of registration and enrollment. And that's something that we're happy to share more broadly as well. We have a distribution list for that, and if anyone's interested in being added to that, please just send me an email or let me know, and we'll make sure to get you on there as well. It takes a little interpretation sometimes because there's always blips and changes in the way that we register students. So sometimes it's helpful to have someone to talk through it with you or give you some guidance on kind of how to interpret that report, but we're more than happy to do that as well.
One of the other questions, Stephen, that came in, well, there's two more. One, actually, Ted, I see his hand is raised. Maybe he's going to ask his question.
Yes, I had a question. Maybe this is a better question for Mr. Carpenter or not, but are enrollment caps high enough for us to consistently make a profit. So here's what I'm getting at. If we're not making a profit and we're keeping the caps the same, more students leads to more debt. Does that make sense?
Are you talking, when you say enrollment caps, are you talking about the caps on our individual class sections?
Correct.
Is that what you're talking about?
So let me give you a theoretical example. Suppose somebody teaches a class, capped at some arbitrary number, right? And technically you're paying that person, let's say $1,000 more than they're getting from the students. You create another section, now you're in debt $2,000.
Sure, yeah, and Ted, it's a great question, and it's always a balancing act for us, right? Because there are programs and courses we offer at the college that are never going to make money, right? And they're balanced by other class sections, and so the really important thing to monitor is more of our like average class size across the institution and where it stands relative to where it needs to be for profitability and those things. And there are standards for that. So SHEV and the VCCS set standards for that. And those are the things we monitor. And kind of going back to your initial question, that is one of the great challenges for us, right? Is not only has our enrollment fallen, but our average class size has fallen considerably over the same number of years, right? Which leads to more financial constraint, right? Because you still have to pay instructors, right, and all the other costs that come from running a class section. So it's an important thing to monitor, and we know it's something that we've got to continue to work on in terms of scheduling and finding that right balance and making good decisions around smaller class sections and what options we have available when we have small class sections we have to run. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. Mr. Carpenter, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
No, you answered well, but I mean, Ted, you are correct. There are certain classes where the more classes you add at a limited number of students, the more money you lose. So you're absolutely right. And we have to be able to have I'll say in large part, gen ed classes that where you can have lots of students in them to offset those classes where you're not going to have as many students or fewer than are needed to even cover the costs of the instructor.
Yeah, so I think one of the things to do is to look at that first before just having more students, because having more students just puts us more in debt. I mean, I look at GatorNet and I can't tell you how many people I see the same instructor teaching and opening another course that's asynchronous rather than just raising the cap. Why have 2 sections at 25 when you get them 1 at 50? It's the same amount of work. You only have 1 Canvas show.
Not really. Because there's something about, I've taught classes where I had 75. And unless you have a teaching assistant, believe me, it becomes overwhelming. 25, somehow we're able to manage that. Because remember, when you assign a paper in one class, you have so many days to get it back. If you have a class of 25, that's manageable. But if you have a class of 50, it becomes much more difficult.
Understood. I was just speaking of asynchronous courses. So to have a course that's at 75 versus 3 courses at 25, it's still the same thing.
I believe that the amount of
you need to teach one like that to understand what I'm talking about. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think we can definitely, we can have some of that conversation sort of in those groups and the folks who are figuring out class sizes and figuring out what makes the most sense for whichever the not only the modality, but also the topic or the course. I think, that's something that I know everybody is looking at. How can we make sure that we are being thoughtful about the size of our courses based on the content, right? If you've got an art class and you can only fit 18 students in the class, and I just guessing on these numbers, then that's as big as it can be, right? But in some other cases, we might be able to have larger classes because it is just we are more capable of managing that. But you're right, we also don't want to have the whole point of some of what we're doing is that we provide personalized attention and we provide excellent teaching, and we don't want to dilute that by going into a different model. So I think, as academic affairs looks at all of those pieces and tries to figure that out, I'm sure that they will, not only take into consideration the modality and what is best for the class size, but also thinking about how that affects the bottom line. One of the questions that came in, and I don't know who can answer this or if there is a direct answer, but how many students do we need for 1,006 FTEs?
Sure. So, and I think that's from Marion. So, Marion, it's different for the summer, right? So the data up on the screen right now are for summer, and typically just kind of an average for summer is typically you have about 3 students to make up an FTE in the summer. So, right around 3,000 students, so a little bit less in the summer 2021 example to get to 1,006 FTEs. It's different in the fall and spring, right? Because students on average take more credit hours. Each student takes more credit hours in a fall or spring semester. So typically you'd need, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 students, the fractional student to make an FTE in the fall and spring.
One more question that came in, and then I know we're coming up at the end of time, is I guess if Michelle Manfred, if you're still on the call, if you can talk a little bit about the information center and how can department heads make sure that they're getting you the information that you need? Maybe she's not on the call.
Yeah, I'm here, Ada.
Oh, there she is. Great.
So running the expo right now at HT.
Oh.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, the JJ came in and did a Zoom presentation for us, and we it was just so informative for us, especially giving us what's happening and what's new. And so I would just encourage them. We can do a Zoom session. It could be pre-recorded, so that we can watch it. But the Information Center, we need to stay on top of what's going on. And we are the front lines. We're talking to students and they're interested in programs. And if they can't reach somebody, when we transfer them about a program, we want to try to give them as much information as we can over the phone and point them in the direction of the web page that might give them more information or hand them off to a department head or a faculty member. So I'm gonna log off now because we got the students here.
Thank you. And thank you for manning that session. One of the things, I will certainly send that email to you, but one of the things that I just wanted to mention that I think probably the biggest lesson learned as we have started to have these conversations is that it is not like one thing, one department or one person or one year that sort of got us where we are today, right? This has been something that as we're learning, we've been in a situation where it has been many, many, many things, or maybe sort of like the perfect storm of things that have gotten us where we are today. And it's not going to be one person, one department, or one thing that gets us out of it, right? So we need to tackle it from all sides. It's enrollment focuses, it's marketing, it's also service, it's workforce, it's promotion, it's all of the things. And they're all connected and interrelated. And I'm sure that you've all been in this situation, right? Like you start having a conversation about one thing and it morphs into all of the other tentacles and tendrils that go out there. And so enrollment is linked to scheduling, is linked to faculty, like there's all of these pieces that are interconnected. So if we know anything, it's that we need to get out of our silos and start having conversations across departments and across divisions. And so as you're identifying these things that could be addressed and could be made better, also start thinking about who are the right people to get around the table in order to start having those conversations, because not one of us can fix it in a bubble or in a silo. So I appreciate that. I don't know if there are any other comments or questions or thoughts before we log off. Don't want to cut the good conversation, but also want to be respectful of everyone's time. It may be the first time that we've actually covered everything we intended to cover in one of the town halls in an hour. So any final comments or questions, feel free to mention that, but otherwise I understand everybody's got a lot to do and get back to. So I appreciate you all. For those of you who are leaving for the summer, thank you. For those of you who are all sticking around with us, we will be here plugging away.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.